When my son was younger, he had very low frustration tolerance, and when something was even slightly challenging to him, he would often resort to learned helplessness, so trying to get me or other adults to rescue him, and he would do this through crying or saying it's too hard, without really putting effort into things. Or when he got a little older, he would start yelling and making a lot of noise, which is my term for arguing or complaining, with the intention of trying to get out of what was frustrating to him. So I want to share with you my top 5 tips for dealing with your child's low frustration tolerance. Number 1, do not rescue them from things that are challenging to them. When you do that, you are denying them an opportunity to develop resiliency and to develop a sense of pride that comes from realizing that they can get through something challenging, even if they're not real successful with it at first. The way kids develop self-confidence is through recognizing their abilities in themselves through actions, not from having conversations about self-esteem or not by talking about feelings, but through action. Number 2, avoid playing armchair therapist when your child is frustrated. Armchair therapist is something parents or other adults do with the best of intentions, where they start asking kids lots of feeling questions like, how does that make you feel? Or they start processing emotions around what's frustrating to them. Well, while that's done with good intentions, the problem is when you spend a lot of time and energy focusing on a child's negative emotions, it validates for them that these negative emotions are so important that maybe they should take precedence over everything else. It also sends them the message that I don't think you can overcome this because rather than encouraging you, I'm just trying to process your feelings with you. I know that might sound counterintuitive to what you've learned before, but trust me, the more adults focus on a child's negative emotions, the less resiliency they develop and the less tolerance they develop for persevering through those temporary emotions. Number 3, teach them the concept of brain breaks. I teach this in Scaffolding Better Behavior, my parent behavior training program. Brain breaks are a way for a child to get back to a better state of self-regulation, and they do that by taking some space or getting away from whatever is frustrating them in the moment. There's no certain way a brain break can look. It can look like the child just going to the other room or taking a walk or shooting a basketball, or you can talk about something else for a little bit. Typically, though, what I suggest when a child has a brain break is for the adult not to talk during the brain break, because the more you talk, the less time they have for their brain to kind of relax and get back to a better state of self-regulation. So I'm not saying they have to be alone, although a lot of kids do much better with brain breaks when they are alone, but what I do suggest is not talk during a brain break. So as an example, what I used to say to my son when he was getting frustrated with something is, go take a brain break right now and come back when you're ready. And sometimes he would fight me on that and say, no, I'm going to finish it now. And I would say, go take a brain break, all right? And whenever you come back is fine. There doesn't need to be a definitive amount of time for a brain break. And I will tell you, in cases where we're talking about homework, I think it's really important to not toxify your relationship with your child over homework. So if they are frustrated with some homework assignment that they can't finish, here's what I suggest. Have your child email the teacher or send a note through the school's homework portal or whatever it is, and just say, I got really frustrated with the homework tonight and I couldn't finish it. That's all that needs to be said. The reason why it's really important for your child to do this and not you is because that's teaching them self-advocacy skills. So it's perfectly fine if you type the email for them, but let them dictate what they want to say to the teacher. So when you allow your child to speak in their own words, what it's teaching them is not only self-advocacy skills, but it's also teaching them that it's okay to say when you're frustrated with something, or it's okay to say, you know what, I worked really hard on this and I got frustrated and I just couldn't do it, because there is nothing wrong with that. Number 4, do not give them reassurance when they are frustrated. What I want you to understand is that reassurance doesn't actually help anybody to recognize they can get through something difficult. In fact, it often makes things worse. So rather than give them reassurance, just acknowledge how they're feeling. You can say something like, hey, I see you're frustrated right now. Why don't you go take a brain break? Or if they say, I don't want to, then just be quiet and sit there with them, like I mentioned before, and say, we can try this, later when you're ready. And that's pretty much all you need to say. So just don't give them reassurance by saying things like, you're so smart, or I know you can do it, because that's really not going to help them. I saved number 5 for last because I believe it's the most important one. Kids with ADHD often have difficulty with what's called episodic memory, which is the emotions we associate with past experiences. Often, they only remember strong negative emotions from the past and have difficulty remembering successes that they've had with things. So what we have to do with kids who have low frustration tolerance is remind them of past successes when they were able to get through something that was frustrating them, or they persevered through something, and it doesn't even have to be something that they were successful with. We want to remind them of they're putting in effort, they're showing resiliency, and them attending to something that might not be interesting or enjoyable to them. It's really important to not have this conversation when your child is already escalated, because when kids are escalated, they cannot really hear and they can't learn. So we can either have that conversation beforehand if you think they're going to get frustrated with something, or we can have it after the fact when they're calm, and it would sound like this. Remember in the fall when you had that science project and it had all those steps and it was confusing and you got really frustrated and said, I can't do this, and you wound up ripping it up. And then a few days later, you went back to it and you were able to do it after the teacher gave you some suggestions. Well, this is the same but different because this is another project that has a lot of steps. And if you get frustrated with it, that's okay. And I know that you will get through it. And if you need my help, just ask for my help. Notice the language I use there, same but different. I use that language to help connect a past success with something in the present. So what was the same is that it was a multi-step project that caused frustration in the past, and what was different was that it was for a different class or a different time of year or whatever it is. So when we use that language, we're helping to tap into kids' episodic memory to help them remember their past success with something that was frustrating to them and remind them how they were able to persevere through it. Last thing I want to mention, frustration tolerance does get better with age. So if you're worried about your child's low frustration tolerance like I was with my son, just know that it will get better with brain maturity. Hope this is helpful. I will speak to you soon. Take care.